Hello again, peeps, to a new video. Yeah, I know it's been quite some time since I've last uploaded something, though I've been to Russia on a field trip for 3 weeks, and in general I've been quite busy recently with exams, etc., which is why I couldn't upload anything. But it was quite a nice field trip, and I had quite a nice semester, and I enjoyed it a lot. But yeah, well, that's not going to be the topic for today's video. Um, I thought it's time for a new Art of the Hook video where I'm going to cover the tracer recall hooks you've all wanted to see, so well, here we go. As for the aspects I want to talk about today, I'm going to discuss mainly the aspects of different tracer playstyles first, then we'll get into the mechanics of a recall hook, a little deeper regarding, for example, the timing of your hook and the recall duration. And finally, I'm also going to discuss the advantages that your environment in the game, like meaning the map design itself, can give you. So the complicated thing about the recall hook is that it can only be used consistently if you know how to play against the tracer you're currently facing against in a match. Why is that important? Well, basically every tracer has a somewhat own playstyle that determines how they engage, how they do their decision making, etc. So in order to be able to make recall hooks more consistently, you should at least know like 3 of the basic tracer playstyles and behaviors that I'm going to feature in this video. But before that, I'm still going to explain a bit about her abilities. The blink is the first ability we have to look at. You might actually wonder why I'm covering it if it's only about recall hooks, but without the blink, a tracer wouldn't be able to engage into the enemy backline that easily or pick out some targets. The general idea of a playstyle is basically flanking, so blinks are basically like her entry ticket into the backline. With a max range of 7.5 meters and 3 charges, she is capable of blinking exactly 22 meters far. So the hook is compared to that only 20 meters long, which is also important to keep in mind for later. Another stat about her blink that you should keep in mind is the charge cooldown, which is about 3 seconds, I think, for one charge. This is important to know when you're timing the recall hook, since the tracer can potentially blink away from her recall position just a second after she lands there. So the timing aspect becomes very crucial and important, but that's a part of a later section. The other ability we're gonna look at now is the recall itself. It has a rewind duration of 1.25 seconds. This value is divided by 2 is basically your time window of opportunity for an attempt at a recall hook. It's not much really, but I will explain the necessary preparations for a recall hook in the next section. What is even more important than the duration though is the location to which she returns. It is defined by the location where the tracer was located 3 seconds ago after she triggered her recall. Is it therefore useful to count the seconds and correlate those with the tracer's location at all times? God no, that's damn ineffective. But knowing her engage timing and the blink positions when she's engaging is a crucial factor to narrow down the possible recall positions to a few areas based around their initial blink steps when engaging. I hope you're still following me up to this point, since knowing those basics makes your attempts much easier, but we will get into examples later. Anyways, now we know the basic valuables, and based on that, I'm going to explain to you the three basic and common playstyles tracers have. Right up, we're going to start with the in and out 1 second adventure type of play. This Tracer player is more common in lower elos since it's the safest playstyle, but by far also the one that provides the least value to a fight. What these Tracers do is pretty much use all of their 3 blink charges to get into the backline at once, fire maybe half a clip or a quarter of a clip, and then recall instantly when they see their health dropping below 125 HP. These type of players usually go for flanks or sometimes even randomly confront their enemies at the front line directly. But it's pretty damn hard to go for a recall hook against such players. Why, you might ask? Well, they're playing it super safe, so their recall location is always miles away from the team fight. Also, it doesn't provide as much value killing them, since they are not contributing much to the team fight. If you ever go for an attempt to a recall hook, those to those type of tracers, just hook into the direction of their blink starting position. It is in this picture you can see an example of their pathing. The starting position from where they use up all 3 blink charges is pretty much the area of probability for a recall. Why is it an area, not a point? Well, you have to consider that the recall sends the tracer back in time for 3 seconds. Assuming the tracer takes 1.5 seconds to get into the team fight, uses 1 second to attack someone, and then instantly recalls, there's still a 0.5 second difference between the recall location and the starting blink position. And those 0.5 seconds can make a difference between 2 points located either here or there or here. If you happen to see her pathing before the blinks, then you can align your hook parallel to those 2 positions for a higher probability of success. Still, this was just an example with given numbers. Some tracers tend to fight longer or need only 1 second to use up all their blinks, which is why you have to adjust to their behavior individually and learn how to connect the dots of their blink locations and their engage duration. It can really help to have a good headset, by the way, if you want to know when the tracer recalls. Then you don't need vision on her and you can solely focus on the recall location. Now we move towards our next tracer player, which I refer to as the cheeky cunt. Cheeky cunts tend to wait behind certain objects or walls and engage only on squishy targets or run away the moment they've been spotted. Usually this is a decent strategy, though it requires the tracer to have a lot of awareness of her surroundings, so she always finds a path to blink away from danger. In this example, the tracer here waits behind a certain object, but only has her focus directed towards that Genji, not knowing what awaits behind her, which is a quite typical behavior for unexperienced players. If you happen to find yourself in such a situation, don't try to chase her, but let your teammates do the job. Since those players are easily scared, you just gotta wait for the recall to happen and hook towards the location she was waiting at. It's by far the easiest way to perform a recall hook. And even if your teammates don't necessarily attack her, just shoot a few rounds at the tracer to bait her into recall. More experienced players who use that strategy usually try to keep their escape paths open. Also, they tend to store 2 charges for escape rather than using all 3 of them and then recall. But even against such players, it's wise to wait at the recall location if the target escapes into a direction opposite of the location of the tracer's teammates. For example, the tracer tries to escape with 3 blinks in order to create space between her and her enemies and force them to follow, force your teammates to follow her further into the room. The strategy is pretty much just a bait to lure them away from a recall position, so after she lured her enemies away, she can recall safely and then go back to her teammates. Even then, you wait at her recall position and let your teammates chase after her, which is something what DPS players usually always do with tracers anyways. But then this is basically one of the easiest ways to attempt a recall hook, because you can just farm, well, the remainings of a poor tracer. As for our third stereotype, I'm going to feature a more common playstyle. I don't really refer to this one in any specific way, since most tracers I play against adapt to this style anyways. But yeah, we can just call it the Pestilence playstyle. Pestilence players know their abilities and the capabilities of Tracer very well. Those type of players usually also have quite a high awareness of their surroundings and know when to back off. Their goal is to disrupt the backline completely and make fight-turning picks. Unlike the in and out 1 second adventure type of player, these tracers don't just shoot 1/4 of a clip into their enemies before recalling, but rather spend some time nagging the whole backline when uncontested. They always notice when opportunities open up to engage, while the enemy frontline is busy or focused on something else. Then they use a specific sequence of skills, which just consists of blinking towards the target once, then half to 3/4 clip if possible, reloading while blinking behind their target, turning around, and then repeating that sad sequence. This goes on for as long as they're uncontested, until they have less than half of their HP, or until their target is dead. Either way, this results in a pick for them, and based on the amount of pressure that is put on such a tracer, she will either flee after her pick or keep on going. As Hog, it's your task to contest her as much as possible, so she doesn't finish off your backline. Just keep her busy from your own front line, and don't necessarily leave your position to chase after her. Depending on her speed and distance from you, you can either decide to use right clicks for long range shots and slower paced blinks, or left clicks for short to mid range distances if her blink speed is faster. As you might have realized, for example, I sometimes tend to right click even and left click even at mid to long ranges. That's basically due to the fact that I either completely caught the tracer's attention and that she avoids right click shots with blinks completely, or because I need my projectiles to reach the tracer fast in a wider spread area. Why is the later important? Well, because tracers can only lose 75 HP until they get the blood sight. For everyone who doesn't know what that is, it's basically the bloody frame around your screen when you're low on health. So if the tracer is already lower on health, let's say around 100 HP, like, she doesn't need to lose much more health in order to get baited into recall, because if she gets that bloody sight, she will much more likely to get into recall, because it's quite a threat for her to stay and keep on going, because she could easily get killed. Yeah, the bloody sight is basically a warning that triggers it, and when you're able to just poke her down slightly with tiny pellets like that, you don't do much damage, but indicate to the tracer that she's being targeted by more targets, and that she's also still losing health. After it has come to a recall, then the next question is basically where the tracer recalls to. For that, we're gonna look at some math again. We know that her recall located her 3 seconds into the past, and a good tracer doesn't full clip necessarily into their target unless they're completely unnoticed. Half to 3/4 clipping is usually the most effective. So assuming she has a starting point, again, half a clip is being used from there, to which she follows up with a blink, then another half clip, and another blink. Blinking to the second point from her original starting position at that speed. She used up one whole clip maybe, which amounts to 1 second and 2 reloads, which then amounts to barely 2 seconds in total. That said, she can at best relocate to her starting point right after she blinks to the second location. These are the raw numbers, meaning if she were to fight longer on her second blink position, she would recall rather to the first one instead of the starting point. What do you need to know as a hog though? Basically, just count her blinks and remember the blink positions themselves, since they have the highest probability of actually, that the tracer is appearing there when recalling. Tracer players tend to move around between their blinks sometimes, but that's usually just a combination of AD crouching, spamming techniques to avoid being hit that easily. And in the following picture, for example, I've drawn some possible outcomes of a tracer's moves when fighting a single target up close. And then you can assume how you should hook according to their move's direction, as well as the speed of their abilities and their shots. I hope it was not too much, it was not too complicated up to this point, but this is just how it is. Just re-listen to some of the stuff I said if you're still not quite sure, because it can get even more complicated. Now, we get to the actual hog related part. Since we know about the tracer movements by now, we can try to adjust our abilities and time them appropriately, so the tracer doesn't get away after the recall, or that we don't hook her too early and miss. As you know, the hook is a linear projectile up to the point when the hook itself, and not the chain, leaves your hand. So it also has a little cast time, which is about 0.3 seconds, I think. If you want to know how to make use of that, look it up in this video right here about flicks. Anyhow, the hook projectile moves 40 meters per second, which is half a second to reach max range. Since the recall takes 1.25 seconds, we have 0.3 seconds for the cast and up to 0.5 seconds to reach max range. That adds up to 0.8 seconds, and when subtracting that from 1.25 seconds, we only have 0.45 seconds left. Yeah, I must stop with the math, don't worry. But usually though, tracers can recall in front of you, and that's about a minor distance which might take 0.4 seconds to hit, which gives us 0.85 seconds time. What exactly does that information tells us? Well, the effective time difference between the max range recalls and minimum range recalls, and with range I mean the hook distance range, is about 0.5 seconds different. So just knowing the distance to the recall position you're hooking at is crucial for the recall timing. So what is a generally appropriate way to approach a recall hook then? Well, simply mathematics will tell us that around 0.5 seconds hook duration is the average for most situations you try to recall hook in. Taking half of the 1.25 seconds of recall time adjusts to around about 0.6 seconds. Since not all tracer players instantly blink away after recall, it's the most effective to start the hook right after half of the recall animation is done. So how do you do that? How do you know when the timing is there? Well, just listen to this very distinct sound.
Just in time.
Yeah. You can hear something like a wormhole closing and opening, which I think sounds pretty funny to be honest. But despite that, when you hear the wormhole opening, you've passed half of the recall time basically, just after the other wormhole closed. That gives you the sign that you're able to start hooking now towards the recall location you're looking at. So why did I explain so much math if it's just half of the animation in the end? Well, it always depends on the range. And you might underestimate the effect this could have on your timing. So if you get a max range target, like max range hook onto a recalling tracer, then hook as early as possible. And if you're trying to get a tracer recall hook on a position that is right in front of you, take your time. But even though it's just not even, if it's just 0.5 seconds difference and it doesn't sound much, it can still quite have an influence on your timing. Last but not least, I'm going to explain some tricks to you that make recall hooking much easier. As the human brain intends to remember things easier with a distinct environmental feature related to them, you can much easier hook a recalling tracer when addressing an object towards the recall position. Like if you want to imagine how your kitchen looks like, where you have stored your forks or knives or whatever, you can basically make a connection in your brain, knowing it's especially maybe it is on a plate somewhere near the oven, for example, and you can just keep those tiny connections that it's on a plate and the plate is on the oven, etc., etc., and that way you can narrow down the location of that very fork or knife to quite small scale area. Yeah. So like a wall or a door frame in Overwatch though, or simply a hallway, this will, for example, narrow down the possibilities of a recall position much more than playing on an open field with no objects to connect that recall position to. So, to give you an example, we'll look at a very easy situation right here on Dorado. Imagine the tracer coming from up here to flank you or your backline. To easily get out of that narrow corridor where she's easy to hit, you just have to threaten her with bullets, and she might eventually blink forwards and behind those pillars. If you keep on chasing her, she might get pressured quite early on and realizes her flanking opportunity has failed. With the recall location in the corridor and a blink in store, her escape is guaranteed at least. So she thinks. If you just threaten her with shots though, you can keep your hook and use that corridor to easily hook her recall position, towards her recall position. You don't have to remember her position on the Y scale I've drawn here, since the hook is aligned parallel to it and the X directions range of the recall location possibilities is not very wide because it's narrowed down by the walls of the corridor. So it's much easier to trap your target. The shots themselves are just bait to get her into recall after all. Quite easy, I think. Something that you might make use of quite often maybe. Now that we've discussed this simple example, we'll get onto another one right on the same map and same area. Let's say you're flanking and you have a tracer approaching your team from main here. Since she blinked in, she's out of your hook range due to those windows that are right here, I think. But as you walk towards main, you can position yourself that way that your line of sight is once again parallel to her walking path. Not always is it easy to predict the walking path of a target you haven't clearly seen, but sometimes it's wise to think up areas of probabilities, which includes these paths here as well. Now we are right in the middle of her walkway, path, whatever, or blinking path, and the tracer recalls. Where could you possibly recall to? We have a pillar in front of us, which is splitting up two possible ways a tracer could have approached. To get a hint which path is more likely, you should listen to footsteps and blinks and judge for yourself how distant the target was. You can also listen to the recall sound and try to determine where it comes from. That does help as well sometimes. So sound can really make a difference in these kind of situations, and since the right path on main around the pillar is usually the first choice for players, which is due to the cover of the wall here, we can align our hook in that direction and hopefully connect it and get the kill. Sometimes sound and vision aren't helpful though, as you can see in the following clip. The tracer steps are barely hearable and not really a good indicator for an approach to a recall hook. Since you only know the direction she went to, you have to pick up other indicators for a proper judgment. As you can see in the clip, the health pack has been taken and is right on cooldown. Just by seeing the position of the health pack and hearing the recall hook sound just a little bit after when it's been triggered by the Junkrat, we can make an assumption that the tracer might have taken the health pack and went in before facing that Junkrat. Since there's not much to lose, even a high risk hook like that with barely any information at all can lead to a surprising outcome. Just picking up the information your surroundings give you can clearly have a great impact on your gameplay. Now, I hope you all enjoyed this video and can actually turn that knowledge into practice. And I'm sorry once again for the lack of content recently, but I really didn't have the time to make more stuff because of university stuff I had to do. Hope you're still staying tuned for more upcoming content, and yeah, I wish you all a great week.